The heart monitor's scream was the only thing cutting through the suffocating silence of operating room 7. It was a flat, unending horizontal line that signaled the end of a life. Dr. Tae-O Kang stood frozen, his gloved hands hovering over the open chest cavity of a man whose name wasn't on any official hospital registry. Blood, dark and arterial, pooled around Tae-O's fingers, staining the pristine white of his surgical gown. This wasn't supposed to happen. Tae-O was the ghost surgeon, the man the elite called when they needed a miracle performed in the shadows, but today, his hands, the hands that had never failed, were trembling. The micro-tremor was invisible to the nurses. But to him, it felt like an earthquake. He had nicked the descending aorta. He had made a mistake. Suddenly, the automatic doors hissed open. No one had been paged. No one was authorized to be here. A woman stepped into the harsh, fluorescent light, already scrubbing her hands with a ferocity that demanded attention. Dr. Nia Abara didn't look at the monitors, she looked at Tae-O's eyes. She saw the fracture in his confidence before he even admitted it. Without a single word, she stepped into the sterile field. She didn't push him away. Instead, she slid her hands into the cavity alongside his, her fingers moving with a rhythmic, percussive speed that felt less like medicine and more like music. She nudged his elbow with hers, a silent command to move. Tae-O instinctively shifted, and in that second, Nia clamped the bleed with a one-handed tie so precise it looked like a magic trick. The flat-line tone broke. A blip appeared. Then another. The rhythmic thump-thump of the patient's heart returned, echoing through the room. Nia stepped back, her dark skin glistening under the surgical lights, her breathing deep and controlled. She didn't wait for a thank you. She pulled off her mask, tossed it into the bin, and looked Tae-O straight in the face. "You're holding your breath, Tae-O," she said, her voice a calm, low hum that vibrated in the tense air. "If you don't breathe, your brain starves. If your brain starves, the patient dies. Try to keep up next time." She turned and walked out, the swing of the doors the only sound left in her wake. Tae-O stood there, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked down at the wooden bead he'd noticed tucked into the tie of her scrub cap, a small, hand-carved piece of mahogany. He realized he wasn't just breathing again, he was feeling something he hadn't felt in 31 years. He was being challenged. The next morning, the hospital was a hive of whispers. Tae-O walked through the lobby. His back straight, his expression an impenetrable mask of granite. Every intern bowed as he passed, a 90-degree show of respect for the man who supposedly never lost a patient. But Tae-O didn't see them. He was looking for the woman who had seen him fail. He found her in a place no other doctor frequented, the old, disused rooftop helipad. Nia was sitting on a plastic crate, a small mortar and pestle held between her knees. She was pounding something that smelled of scorched earth and fire. The rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the wood hitting the spices was the exact tempo of the heartbeat they had saved the night before. Tae-O stood at the entrance, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against the concrete. He didn't say hello. He didn't apologize for his coldness. "Your technique with the clamp was adequate," he said, his voice stiff. "But your presence in that room was unauthorized." "Who told you to come?" Nia didn't look up. She kept her eyes on the spices, her arm muscles tensing with every strike. "No one told me," she replied. "I heard the monitor through the vents. It was out of tune. I can't stand a bad rhythm." She stopped pounding and held out a small piece of what looked like dried ginger. "Taste this." Tae-O hesitated. He was a man of protocols and sanitized environments. He didn't eat mystery roots on rooftops. But Nia's gaze was a dare. He took the piece and put it in his mouth. The heat was immediate. It wasn't just spicy, it was a deep, soul-shaking warmth that made his throat tighten and his eyes water. He coughed, his face turning a shade of pink that his colleagues would have never recognized. "It's alligator pepper," Nia said, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "It wakes up the senses." "You've been asleep for a long time, doctor. You should probably stay for the rest of the meal." Tae-O didn't leave. He sat on the edge of a rusted railing, watching her. He watched the way she didn't try to make herself pretty or soft for him. She was fierce, precise, and entirely herself. He found himself reaching into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the silk cloth he used to clean his fountain pens. Usually, he would be obsessively polishing the nib, but now, he was just watching her hands. "Why are you here, Nia?" he asked, the question softer than he intended. "A surgeon with your hands could be at Johns Hopkins. You could be in London. Why this hospital?" Nia's expression flickered, a shadow of something old and heavy passing through her eyes. "We all have debts, Tae-O. Some of us pay them with money. Some of us pay them with blood. I like to pay mine with healing. What about you? Who owns your hands?" Tae-O went still. It was the high-context question he had been avoiding his entire career. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached over and took the pestle from her. He began to pound the spices, trying to mimic her rhythm. He was too fast, too clinical. She reached out, her hand sliding over his to slow him down. The contact was electric, a slow burn of heat that had nothing to do with the peppers. For a moment, the world of hospital hierarchies and criminal conglomerates vanished. There was only the wood, the spice, and the pulse between their palms. The silence was broken by the sharp chirp of Tae-O's encrypted phone. He looked at the screen, and his face instantly reverted to the Ice King mask. The men in suits were coming. He stood up, the warmth leaving his body as quickly as it had arrived. "Go back downstairs, Nia," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't be seen with me today." "Why? Is the ghost going back into the shadows?" she asked, her voice laced with a disappointment that cut deeper than any insult. Tae-O didn't answer. He walked away, but as he reached the door, he stopped. Without looking back, he said, "The rhythm, it was better when you were holding the pestle." The next 3 days were a descent into the dark. A man known as the Viper, the enforcer for the conglomerate that funded Tae-O's secret wing, had arrived at the hospital. He wasn't there for a checkup. He was there to ensure that a rival witness didn't survive his upcoming surgery. Tae-O sat in his office, his hands folded on his desk, staring at the black sedan idling in the parking lot. He felt like a bird in a gilded cage, his brilliant mind used only to facilitate the survival of monsters. He found Nia in the cafeteria, but he didn't sit with her. He walked past her table and dropped a folded piece of paper. If you're enjoying this story of mystery and unspoken tension, make sure to hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments what you think Tae-O is hiding. Nia opened the paper. It wasn't a love note. It was a list of medical supplies and a floor plan of the basement. She looked up, her eyes meeting Tae-O's across the crowded room. He didn't nod. He just adjusted his tie, a specific, sharp tug that she recognized from the OR. It was a signal. Danger. That night, the tension in the hospital was thick enough to taste. The Viper and 2 armed men were stationed outside the restricted wing. Tae-O was inside, prepping for a surgery he knew he was supposed to fail. His heart wasn't in the work, his mind was on the woman who was currently crawling through the ventilation shafts to bypass the security cameras. When Nia dropped into the prep room from the ceiling, she was covered in dust but her eyes were bright with a terrifying kind of joy. "You're late," Tae-O whispered, his hands steadying her as she landed. "You should really clean your vents, Tae-O. Hard to breathe in a place with so many secrets," she whispered back, a smirk playing on her lips. "Give me the scalpel. We're doing this our way." They worked in total silence, a secret language of glances and nods guiding them. Tae-O would gesture with his chin, and Nia would anticipate the move, passing the clamp before he even realized he needed it. They weren't just saving a witness, they were reclaiming their own agency. As they sutured the final wound, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. The Viper was tired of waiting. Tae-O looked at Nia. There was no fear in his eyes anymore, only a fierce, protective fire. "Hide in the supply closet," he commanded. "I don't hide," she snapped back. "We finish this together." She grabbed a heavy oxygen tank and positioned herself behind the door. When the Viper burst in, expecting to find a dead witness and a compliant surgeon, he was met with the cold end of a sedative needle Tae-O had hidden in his palm. As the men stumbled, Nia swung the tank with the precision of a striker, clipping his knees. The enforcer hit the floor with a dull thud. Tae-O stood over him, breathing hard. He looked at Nia, who was dusting off her hands, her braids slightly undone, her face flushed with the African vitality he had come to crave. He realized then that he didn't want the Italian shoes or the glass office. He wanted this. The friction. The heat. The partnership. They didn't run. They spent the next hour using the Viper's own encrypted phone to upload the conglomerate's dirty files to every major news outlet in Seoul. As the upload bar reached 99%, Tae-O turned to Nia. "They will come for us," he said, his voice grounded and real. "My family, the board, they won't let this go." Nia walked over to him, stepping into his space until their chests were almost touching. She reached up and tucked a stray hair behind his ear, a gesture so tender it made his breath hitch. "Let them come," she said. "I've lived my whole life in the sun. It's time you learned how to stand in it too." The morning sun began to bleed through the hospital windows, turning the sterile hallways into paths of gold. The police arrived, but not for the doctors. They arrived for the men in the black sedans. Tae-O and Nia walked out of the front doors side by side. For the first time, Tae-O didn't care who was watching. He didn't care about the bows or the whispers. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked at her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the mahogany bead he had kept since the first night. He placed it in her palm and closed her fingers over it. "I think this belongs to you," he said. Nia looked at the bead, then at him. She didn't say thank you. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers interlocking with his. The slow burn had finally reached its peak. It wasn't a K-drama ending with a rain-soaked confession. It was two warriors standing in the light of a new day, their hands stained with the work of saving lives, and their hearts finally in sync. If you want to see more stories where love and justice collide in the most unexpected ways, make sure to like this video and share your favorite moment in the comments below. What would you do if you discovered your partner had a secret life,